Okay, you take the lead.
All right.
Three, two.
Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you're at in the world. I'm Nicole Sackage, and we're here with Grant Cameron, and this is our third interview in a row, all related to triangle craft sightings. And tonight we're here with our pal Dave Scott from Spaced Out Radio, and he's going to share his triangle sighting experiences with us. So, Dave, we'll just let you jump right on in.
Well, first off, I figured after everything that's gone on in the UFO world in the last 24 hours, 48 hours, that I would wear my Marvin the Martian toque, not a beanie, it's a toque, and I would, show my representation of the alien world that is amongst us here, because you know what? We're starting to learn, and there may be some people who disagree with this, but we've got aliens. And we got to accept that we got aliens. No, but anyways, I have seen two black triangles in my life, and this happened way before Spaced Out Radio was even a thought, and they happened within a few months of each other. And one happened in 2013, the other one happened in 2014. When I started going through, and a lot of people who have heard my story will understand that I sometimes use the word, and I don't know if it's the correct terminology or not, but I had a lot of fast tracking going on, and I had a lot of real weird things happen quickly. And my critics will come out there and say it's impossible for one person to be able to experience all of this stuff. The one thing that I do try and do is, with my journalism background and knowing and understanding what journalism and journalistic integrity is, which I can't say as much on the rest of the UFO field. If I lie, I'm lying to my audience. If I lie, I am lying to my guests. If I lie, I'm ruining an opportunity to expand my own credibility in this field. And I think we could all understand that for those of us who have experiences, whether it's paranormal, UFOs, Bigfoot, whatever it may be, it's hard to come out publicly. It's even harder if you put your name out there as not only a face for radio like I have with a voice for print, or you have the understanding that you don't want to pull the rug over the people's eyes, and you're almost willing to be a sacrificial lamb as part of what is going on. So back in 2013, I had this uncanny ability around my friends that I could summon UFOs. And I don't know how I was able to do it. I remember looking on the internet to see if, and Google was my best friend and my worst enemy back then, because the experiences that I was having were not very, how can you put it? They were always close to what I was experiencing, but never the same. And it was enough to, wet the whistle a little bit, but it wasn't enough to get any sound out of it. And I found that very frustrating. So I started testing myself in trying to bring UFOs in. And it would almost happen like mini premonitions, where I recall the one time when I saw a black triangle, and I did this for a number of my close friends back then. But we had that day, I just felt, you know what, something's going to happen tonight. So I called up my friends, and I'm no longer friends with these people, but they were friends at the time. And I said, what are you and your wife doing tonight? And this gentleman says, we're doing nothing. I said, why don't you come over on my patio? Because I had one of those little patio fireplaces, and I said, come on over. We'll light a fire. We'll have some beers. We'll play some music, and we'll watch the UFOs fly over. And he goes, UFOs? He goes, how do you know they're going to fly over? I said, I don't. I said, I just got a feeling. And he kind of laughs. He goes, well, the beer and the music and the fire sound great. He goes, yeah, we'll be over around, when do you want us there? I said, well, come over about 8:30, 9 o'clock. I said, that's when it starts to get dark. because this happened in the spring, and you got to wait a little bit for it to get dark. And he's like, yeah, no problem. So it got to about 9:30 that night where, and I'm going to quickly draw this out for you, where we were sitting around, we got some music blaring, probably Guns N' Roses, because I'm pretty in tune with that. And my house that I lived in Mission, British Columbia at the time was my patio faced south. So about 10, 11 miles south of me was the Washington state border. And I lived up on a mountainside, so I could see right into Washington state. And I had a beautiful view of Mount Baker to the southeast, and Chilliwack, British Columbia was to the east of me. Vancouver was to the west. South of me was Abbotsford, and then Sumas, Washington. And so we were standing on the patio, and I was kind of facing east. And that's when at about 9:30 or so, we saw the first one. And I'm not a big beer drinker. If anybody has ever been around me, I can make one beer last about 4 hours. I just a real slow beer drinker. Tequila, that's another story. But that's only for Vegas. But I'm not a real big drinker at all. And so here I was sipping on a beer. I'm talking to my buddy, and I'm kind of facing him like I'm talking to you guys right now. And I kind of looked beyond his shoulder because it was a clear night sky. There's no moon out. It was a moonless night. And all of a sudden, I see something like that. I don't know if you can see that.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Okay. So the two round parts on it are like silver orbs.
Mhm.
And in between that rod was like the street lights, that street light orange that we all have now. That's what it looked like. So that street light orange on the bar with the two round orbs. And what was real interesting about that was there was no contrail, there was no spark trail like a meteor would. And we watched this thing, and I pointed at my friends. I'm like, look, there it is. And there was a few swear words in between. And my friend at the time, his wife came from a very Catholic family, so she's like, "Oh my God, holy Jesus, and Mother Mary," and starting to throw a few Hail Marys out. She's starting to freak out, and she's like, "What is that?" I'm like, "I don't know." I said, "I told you we'd see something tonight," and sure enough, this rod goes from southwest east to northwest, and that was kind of cool, right? And we were freaking out. My buddy's like, "How did you know this was going to happen?" I said, "I don't know. I don't know how I can tell. I just know when it's going to happen." I said, "But here's the weird part. I don't think we're done yet." And he's like, "Really?" I said, "Yeah, I think there's going to be more. Don't go inside. There's something going to happen. I don't know when. I just got a feeling there's going to be more." So about 25 minutes later, we're still talking about this rod. And when you get close to the bottom of a glass or a bottle of beer, you kind of tilt your head back, right? So here I am, I'm left-handed, so I'll go like this, tilting my head back, and I look above my house, and I said, "Oh my gosh, what the F is that?" And my buddy says, "What?" And I went, "Holy F, holy F, holy F." And his wife starts, what? She starts freaking out, and I pointed up. Because right above my house, I mean, it only looked a few thousand feet, but there was a black triangle sitting over my house. And, when we look at black triangles, I'm just my horrible artist rendering here. When we look at black triangles, we always see the three lights in the corner. You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Well, here's the problem with mine is that rod that we saw earlier, it was connected underneath. And the entire undercarriage of this black triangle was connected by these same orange rods, kind of like that. The same orange rods with
Wow.
the silver balls, you know, with the same silver orbs underneath the carriage. And we are freaking out, absolutely freaking out. And this thing heads straight north. There's no sound. And my friends didn't see this. We watched this craft like a door, invisible door opened in the sky. And then part of the craft started disappearing slower and like slowly. The front was gone. The second section was gone. The third section was gone. But what my friends didn't see, what I kind of saw, was, to me, it almost looked like they were morphing into a triangle of geese.
Wow.
Now I'm not sure if I saw what I thought I saw. What I do know is that this craft flew into what looked like an invisible door and just kind of disappeared. There was never any sound. There was never any noise, no buzzing, no propulsion sounds, nothing. It was the big black triangle in the sky. So that was number one. The second one I saw happened a few months later, where I was standing with a friend and I was kind of consoling her because the man she was in love with had broken her heart. And, you know, I was kind of like her, well, let's face it, we had friend zoned each other years ago. And here we were standing in her yard, and she had this long driveway, and there was like these 30-40 foot trees kind of pillaring her driveway. And it was a summer night. It was like August or something like that, of 2014. And she's sitting on a patio chair, and I'm kind of standing in front of her a few feet away. And she's like, I just can't believe what's going on. And all of a sudden something caught my attention as I looked up, right in between her driveway where this cathedral of trees were. And I saw the one triangle, this giant triangle. It was massive, massive. And of course, there's the three lights, just as everybody else sees in the corner. All the stars behind it are blacked out. It's probably 11:30 at night. And this thing is massive, massive. Now, I know I'm probably exaggerating here, but my imagination tells me this thing was so big that if I put it on the ground, it probably would have covered from Vancouver right into the Fraser Valley, which is about 100 kilometers or 62 miles. I mean, like I said, I could be completely exaggerating. I don't know. This thing, all I know was it took up an entire chunk of the sky. And so I'm standing there and I'm staring at it, and I said, holy shit, pardon my language. And she goes, what? And I pointed up. I'm like, look behind you. Stand up, look behind you right now. Because all of a sudden you get that panic, right? That anxiety panic, like, holy cow, am I seeing what I'm seeing? And we saw the triangle. Okay, so your typical triangle, and then it started to turn like this. And we're staring at this thing, and now she's freaking out because she's never seen anything weird before. And here we are, just the two of us, watching this giant triangle start to turn on its axis. And I kind of looked to the west because I could see flashing lights over there. And as I was looking, I could say, okay, that's a jet coming from Vancouver International Airport heading east. And as that jet got closer, the bottom light went out, the second light went out, the third light went out. But the really cool part about it was we could still see it in the sky because it was blocking all the stars. So we have this triangle, no lights on, the jet goes flying by, and literally this thing just vanishes. All of a sudden, don't know where it went. The corner lights never turned back on, but all of a sudden there's all these stars right where this craft was sitting. Don't know how it disappeared. Don't know if it left to the left, to the right, to the south, to the north, or shot straight up. Have no idea. No idea. All we know is it was there. It turned on its axis. Plane comes from Vancouver. turns its lights off, and then vanishes right after the plane flies by.
Wow. Do you think maybe you witnessed a cloaking at that point, or like a poof gone, like we described the observables?
I don't know.
Yeah.
That I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't
It's
know.
amazing.
It was so fast.
Mm-hmm.
Like that entire section maybe lasted 2 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
You know, because
Wow.
it never seems very fast. But that one, what really stuck out for me on that one was the absolute size. Once again, there was no sound, there was nothing. And the weird part about it was after I started the radio, right before I started the radio show, a couple weeks before, where she lived, we went about 20 miles into the mountains, and with Samantha Mowat and a couple of other UFO researchers that I knew at the time. And Samantha is saying, there's a craft around here. There's a craft. I could feel it. There's a triangle. There's something around here. And we come out of the mountains. My phone gets hit with 10 text messages from my friend who says, where the hell are you? There's a black triangle hanging out over the mountains as I'm looking toward, because the mountains were behind her house, and we're in the mountains. We could not see that black triangle. Samantha Mowat is telling us there's a black triangle out there. And when we finally get into cell phone service, I get lit up that there's a black triangle sitting over the mountains and my friend is watching it.
That's great.
Crazy.
That's
Crazy.
how I felt with my last sighting in July, when I had people from 2 different towns, you know, calling me while I was out there witnessing it myself. It was great. Okay, Dave, and now to continue on with our part 1 of your experiences, I believe we left off with your window peeping alien.
Oh, Carl.
Yeah.
Okay, Carl. Yeah. You know what? I was one of those people, and I still am to this day, where I always have my outside lights on. And, you know, I don't know why, but for the previous few nights leading up to April 15th or April 20th, 2015, pardon me, I had not turned my lights on outdoors at all. And I didn't really understand why I was doing that, but I'd forgotten to do so. So on the third night, I remember right before going into the show that, I got to turn the lights on, but I left them off again. And I was interviewing a gentleman named Harvey Kraft that night. And we were talking Buddha of all topics. And here we were just having a great conversation. And about 15 minutes, 17 minutes into the show, I saw something move out of the corner of my eye, because when I was doing the show, I had to move my daughter downstairs, and I took her old bedroom upstairs, which was right beside our front door, and I ended up making that into the radio studio. It was one of the only places where I could get a little privacy into my house, and it was like, oh, come on, you know, not the greatest positioning, but there was not much that I could do at that point. And so anyways, I'm doing the show, and I had a window about 3 feet to my left, and I see a figure move in that window out of the corner of my eye. And the first thing that comes to my mind is, crap, someone's coming over. Someone is going to knock at the door. They forget I have the radio show, because the radio show is only 6 months old at that time. And they're going to knock. My dogs are going to start barking. And I had a little Chihuahua Dachshund cross, where a crosswind would equate to about 32 minutes of barking. And you bring somebody to the door, and well, that's another 30 minutes. And barking never sounds good on the radio. So I ended up thinking, oh no. And I'm playing this through my head. And a few minutes later, I realize there's no knock at the door, and there's no barking of the dogs. So Harvey's talking. I put my microphone on mute, and I swiveled my chair like this to look out the window. And as my eyes gained focus from the light inside to the darkness outside the window, that's when everything became clear. And I saw a giant gray head with big black eyes staring at me from the other side of the window. And so I did what any grown man would do. I jumped backwards in my chair. My chair almost fell over. I screamed like a schoolgirl. And then I caught my breath. I remember shaking my head. I've got my headphones that are like the cord is like getting all wrapped up, and my headphones are starting to pull on my head. And I jump up and I go to the window, and it's gone. I didn't see it leave. If that was a human being, I would have seen it go into my driveway. I would have seen it take off across my lawn. I would have seen some sort of exit point. I even looked down to see if somebody had tucked themselves underneath the window. And so Harvey's still talking in my headphones, by the way, as this is going on. He doesn't know a thing. So Harvey ends his sentence. I put my microphone back on. I said, Harvey, we've just had a little bit of an incident here. I saw a figure. I didn't want to say alien, you know. I saw a figure at my, I didn't know if it was inside or out, or if it was a reflection, but I know I saw something. And well, what did you see? And I'm like, I'm not going to tell this guy that I just had an alien at my window. That's not going to sound very good. And so we just kind of went on. In the meantime, Harvey starts talking to another question that I had asked. I'm very rattled. And I text my partner and I said, alien at the window, get in here now. So as I'm doing the interview with Harvey, my partner walks into the studio and she's quite empathic. She puts her hands up, and her hands are normally cold. And her hands all of a sudden go red hot. Like you could see the redness on the palms of her hands. And she is like, whoa, the energy in here is nuts right now. And so she immediately goes into Palo Santo and, smudging mode, going all over the house to every window and door, smudging everything that was coming in. And I was rattled. And thank goodness the show at that point was only 2 hours long, right? Because I got done for the show, immediately go on Facebook, and I just become a few months previous friends with a guy named R. Keith Andrews, who a lot of people will say is a little bit of a wingnut when it comes to his ET contact, but he believes it. He's very intuitive with it. I find him to be very good at what he does. And I get on the phone with him after the show, and I said, Keith, I don't know what the hell this was. I said, but I need your help right now. And Keith has never seen my house, never been to my house. We live about 400 kilometers apart from each other. And at this time, I'm in Mission, British Columbia. He's in Kelowna, British Columbia. And he goes, okay. He goes, you have a slight slope in your front yard between yours and your neighbor's house. And there's only about 20 feet between your houses, right? And I'm thinking, okay, do you have a camera on my house? I'm like, yeah. And he's like, that's where the ship was parked. He goes, it was a tiny ship. That's where he parked it. I said, well, what the hell was he doing at my house? He goes, Dave, look what you do. He goes, you're not just broadcasting to the world, but that signal shoots out into the stars. He goes, if an alien picks up something like that, or he calls them off-worlders, if an off-worlder picks up a signal like that, of course they're going to get curious and check you out, right? Why wouldn't they? And that's how the legend of Carl started. He needed a name. So a few months later, I just said, screw it. I'm going to call him Carl. So that it was as easy as that. But I mean, that the whole incident lasted maybe 10 seconds.
Yeah.
But his gray head, what I remember was his chin was rounded, but it was pointy. It was rounded. And then it went real bulbous at the top. His eyes were teardropped, but the sharp points of the teardrops were on the outsides with the big rounded part on the inside. I remember seeing the cheekbones, And I
Mhm.
remember seeing just a slit for the mouth, but his eyes, no word of a lie, were probably that big a piece. Like
Wow.
his head was massive, massive. And when you're that close, like in reality, him and I were within 7 feet of each other. That is life altering, absolutely life altering, and I will get a tattoo of him one day, you know, and then it was a couple years later when I'd moved up here. A lot of people who have ET experiences, and you guys know this from your research, you start to recognize their energy when they're around. You know when something is going to happen. And I was interviewing Olaf Phillips from Paranoia Magazine. We were talking secret space program, and we just entered the final half hour of a show. This is going back to 2017, 2018. Yeah, one of those years. And it was August. It was weird because I always thought the date was in October, but it was in August when I went to do the show. Real Mandela effect kind of thing there. I don't know why, but that's what I like to call it. My own personal Mandela effect. And here's the weird part. Olaf thought it happened in late September or October as well. And I talked to a couple other people who were close to me in the spaced out radio circle, and they all thought it was around October as well. And when I went back in the archives, it actually happened in August. And I don't know. It was just like a weird Mandela effect kind of thing. That's the only explanation I have for it, because Lord knows my memory is just awesome. But anyways, it was about 11:36 Pacific time, and my old studio, which is behind me, right against this wall. Oh, that wall there. This wall never used to be there. There's another wall about equating to where this wall is, and that's where I had my desk. And there's a window on the other side of this wall. And I felt something looking at me, just clear as day. And immediately I knew it was Carl. I recognized the energy, and I started saying to my audience, Carl's back. I know Carl's here. And Olaf is like, what? I'm like, Carl's here. I can feel him. He's around. He's like, well, do you see him? And I'm like, no, I don't see him. Like he was in my carport, but it was like he was off in the distance. So after the show, I quickly hang up on Olaf on Skype. I get on my cell phone. I call Olaf back. And Grant, you've seen my driveway. It's kind of two-tiered down at the bottom. And I had both my vehicles parked at the bottom, kind of away from my carport. And I watched with Olaf on the phone these two Nike swooshes, best way I could put it, like Nike swooshes, but they were in it like a yin and yang. And they floated at about 6 feet right in between my vehicles. And I'm only about 30 feet away from this, lack of a better term, orb, going from the back end of my vehicles to the front. And I'm telling Olaf this as it happens. And so he's like, well, you're going to go over there? I said, hell no, I'm not going over there. Why would I do that? Right? And he's like, well, you have to check it out. And as we're talking and we're debating this, the orb comes back the opposite way and then kind of takes off into the sky. Well, now I got to check this out. I'm like, dude, the energy here was as thick as butter, and you're trying to cut it through it. So, okay, Olaf, you're coming with me on the phone. We're going to walk over between my vehicles and see if Carl's there. He's like, yeah, man, do it. Let's do it. Okay. And so I walk on over there, and nothing. But I'm getting spooked. Like it's now 12:15, 12:20 in the morning. And I'm like, Olaf, I'm going back inside. I have to hang up right now, and I have to give our Keith Andrews a call. So he's like, yeah, no problem, man. So as I walk into my house, I walk upstairs, go out on my upper patio, which is above my carport, and I call our Keith Andrews. Or right before I call our Keith Andrews, I start scanning my backyard, scanning up my driveway, And if you knew the area where I live, there's no street lights. Everything is dark. Don't have any outside lights on because I want my eyes to be able to focus in case I could see anything. And I start hearing,
Eee.
and so all of a sudden I'm start listening to this conversation because part of the clicking is coming from up my driveway where I have some pretty big trees. And the other part is coming from my backyard. Kind of in behind the trees. I don't have a lot of trees in my backyard, but in behind my cherry tree, and my cherry tree's all bloomed, and I can't see behind it because the branches are really thick. And I'm hearing this conversation. So I get on the phone with Keith. I'm like, dude, I got some serious stuff happening here right now. And he goes, by the way, have you heard any weird noises? Out of the blue, Keith says this. And I'm like, yes. And it was just like right out of the movie Signs, where the kid holds up the intercom from on top of the car. And yeah. So all of a sudden, Keith does this thing. He goes, so I went, yeah, this clicking sound. And I'm like, and he's like, no, does it sound more like this? And he does this thing with his throat. And I'm like, that's it. That's the sound. And as soon as I said, that's the sound, my backyard in that same sound, like they heard Keith on the phone. So Keith is like, okay, I've got the picture now. I'm tuned in. He goes, there's 3 of them there. He goes, it is Carl. Carl and his buddy are in your backyard. He goes, they got one up the driveway because they're a little freaked out right now. I said, why are they freaked out? I said, my ass is puckered up like anything right now. And he goes, Dave, think about it. They're used to when they get around people, they're used to people running away. He goes, you're standing your ground right now. And I'm like, okay, so where's the ship? He goes, I don't know. He goes, it isn't there, but they're stuck there right now. And they're freaking out because they don't want you to see them. I'm like, but it's Carl. It's Carl. He goes, I know it's Carl. Like, come on. And I'm like, so I start yelling in the forest, hey, Carl, I know you're there. Just come on out. Come on out. And, you see the shimmering of shadows in the, there wasn't I don't even remember. I think the moon was out that night. We get a lot of moonless nights up here. And all of a sudden, about 15, 20 minutes after this, like this is I still got Keith on the phone. I get this premonition that if I drive down to the lake 2 miles west of me, I'm going to see the craft. And I said, Keith, what do I do? He goes, you go. I said, what if something happens? He goes, then you go for a ride. Okay. So I run inside, I grab my keys, I hop in my vehicle, and instead of turning right to the lake, I said, screw this. If I'm going for a ride, I'm going to Tim Hortons in town first because I need a donut and an ice cap. I'm not leaving on an empty stomach. So literally, no, this is true. I mean, how much more Canadian can you get than that? Then, let's see, UFOs on the right, Tim Hortons on the left. So screw it. I'm going to Tim Hortons, grab myself a Canadian maple donut. Grant will know what that is, and an ice cap. And then from there, go through the drive-through, speed back to past my road, head straight to the lake. I park at the lake. I still got Keith on the phone as this is all going on. Pull into the parking lot at the lake, and it is silent. Absolutely silent. And he's like, what do you feel? I said, I feel they're around. I absolutely feel it. He goes, do you want to get out of your car? I said, hell no, I don't want to get out of my car. This is freaky here. I mean, because my area, okay, it's not just about aliens on the ground, potentially. It's cougars, bears, wolves, coyotes, moose. There's a lot of stuff that could kill you up here in the middle of the night. So I put my high beams on. I said, okay, after about 15 minutes, I finally decided I'm going to step out of the vehicle. And I stepped out of the vehicle. I had my door open just in case I had to jump back in. And I'm looking at the stars above. It is clear. I got the Big Dipper. I got every constellation in my area lighting up like a Christmas tree. And there's no UFO. I'm looking for triangles. I'm looking for strange lights. I didn't even see a satellite. And after about 40 minutes at the lake, I said, Keith, I'm just not feeling anything. Like, I don't feel like it's here. He's like, well, why don't you go back to your driveway and see if Carl and his friends are still in your yard? So I go back home, pull into my driveway. The minute I pulled into my driveway, I knew they were gone. The entire energy had changed. And no, I don't blame Tim Hortons for this, just for the record. I do not blame Tim Hortons or my craving for it, but I learned something really important, and I actually told this to Brandon Fugel, the owner of the Skinwalker Ranch. I said, Brandon, do you know how they leave? And he goes, no. I said, well, let me explain something to you, because this is now twice this has happened. Now, if you recall, when I was telling you the story about Samantha Mowat and I in the forest, we got called to a different part of the forest because we were kind of thinking in our head, or there was an image in our head that there was more action over on the other side of the forest. So we left the two in the forest that we were staring at, and walked over to the other side looking for more action, and there was nothing there. Well, the same thing happened to me this night as well. And this is what I told Brandon Fugel. I said, what they do is I said, this is just my theory, but it's happened to me twice now. They project, in order for them to leave, they project you to go to a different area where the contact is going to continue. And when you get nothing there and go back to the original location, everything is gone. Everything has changed. And that's how I think in that timeline. I don't know how they leave or why they won't show how they leave, but I have a very strong feeling that that's why they do it. And that's how they exit without a trace. It's all by putting another projection in our heads that if we go to a different area, it's going to continue, and then nothing happens. But we've given them enough time because human curiosity says you're not just going to wait 1 minute, 2 minutes, 5 minutes at this new location. You're going to give it a 15, 20, 30-minute try to see what's going on because you don't want to miss anything, which is enough time for them to escape. And that's how they leave. That's my theory.
I like your theory. I've pondered this a lot lately myself because, well, last Friday I was at the very end of your show. I was explaining my last sighting, and just that time differential of when I was experiencing those symptoms of I got to go out, there's something there, and then there was nothing. And then it continued on, and it was virtually 2 hours later. It's like, why didn't I stay in my spot? And I got called back out. So I've been kicking around in my head that there is some sort of time displacement, whether it's purposeful or not. But I like your theory as well. So I like that one.
Grant, what's your opinion of that?
I've had no experiences like that. No, I've got no experiences. I really don't have an opinion. It makes sense what you're saying, but mine were pretty. They came and they went. The couple times I had the closest sort of encounters, like your ones mine were more like your triangle sightings, where there was a time when they came, there's a time when they left. I've never had anything. I'll tell the story with the triangle where if something had occurred, it occurred when this thing was sitting above the car, and this is where I used to describe it like they took a piece of film and they cut the film and then they put it back together again, and it jerks, like everything seems to stop, and then it goes, and it's like the fear went away. I had this tremendous fear and it went away. And now the analogy I use is like it blinked. It was there and I'm looking at it, and then it blinked, and then everything changed. Like the fear went away and it started to move as if there may have been some time lapse in between, because when I had mine, I was 76. So there was really, Travis had just been abducted a couple of months before. There was really no discussion about abductions. It was not a discussion. Nobody even knew that these kind of things exist. It was a very rare type of thing. There'd only been, Betty and Barney Hill, the Schumer guy in 67, the Pascagoula case, and Travis Walton. That was it. There was only 4 abduction cases there were. So now we have a different view of, timelines and abductions and what they can do. When I had my experiences, it was basically, if you were lucky, if you saw a UFO, it was a random event, that kind of thing.
Well, Grant, I like what you just said too about like maybe a splice in the film and that jerk, because my first sighting when I was 15, I described that as a pause. It was like I felt paused and then it was gone.
Yeah.
And I can see that's a good explanation.
That's where there was actually a guy who had that experience. When the stuff happened here, the National Enquirer was big time into UFOs. They had a reporter. He was spending piles of money. Bob Pratt, who became famous for doing UFOs, he came up here, and I was sort of like his tour guide. I knew all the people who had sightings, and we went around. And he interviewed all these people, and I watched how he did it and stuff like that. We had a guy out of Red Lake, Ontario, who was a bush pilot type guy who was flying in and out of there, and he tells the story of flying in this Piper Cub or whatever he was flying in, and this thing flew in front of him. It looked like a rocket with this exhaust coming out the back of it, and it came right in front of the plane. And this is where he used the description, like they cut the film. He said suddenly he was sitting there in midair, and he could see the prop of the plane, like when it's in the wind, when you stall the plane, and the prop is just slowly going around, and yet he's frozen in this position watching this prop slowly go around. And then he said it was like they put the film back together, and boom, they put the film together, and the thing started to move again, and it went past him, and the prop started up, and the plane started up, and it frightened him so bad. And he was a big guy. He was a big, heavy set guy. He said they had to carry him out of the plane when he landed the plane. He was that shaken up by what had happened. And he was the one that described this thing about cutting the film, which may be what they do. I mean, they can, to us, time and space is very linear, but they can prop it, pull you out, put you back in, and you have no idea that anything even happened. And if they block the memory, you don't know what happened in between.
Unless you get regressed.
Yeah, or they let you have it, because that's one of the theories I have about UFOs is people say, oh, they take your memory away, and it's like, no, they don't. At some point, in fact, there was a woman who was in Texas who talked about, she hated the Greys. She actually died young. She kept saying they were going to kill her and whatever, and she did die young of cancer or whatever, but she talked about her teaching her husband to do regression, and she was doing self-hypnosis. She said she was starting to teach him how to do it. And she said, suddenly, boom, he went into deep hypnotic regression. He started talking about this thing over top of the town hall, and it's here, and they're putting this thing in my leg, and they say, it is now time for you to remember. So I do believe that they open you up. That's what they do. Or if you remember the story with, I don't know if you've ever interviewed Barbara Lamb, but she tells this story, and I always quote it. I play the clip where Barbara says she's taking a regression course in the 1990s. She's never thought of UFOs before. And then she's in the final training course, the final level, and they say, oh, from time to time, you may come across these people who believe they've been abducted by gray aliens. And then she says, this voice in her head says, listen carefully, Barbara, you're going to be doing this. And she said within a couple of days, the first person came to her for an alien regression, and now she's done like 3,000 regressions or whatever. But she's funny as she says, as this guy is saying this, she's, in her voice is, listen carefully, Barbara, you're going to be doing this.
Oh wow!
And that's the thing. It's almost like they're almost, or like Jim Semivan says, where I will have to get Melinda to get him to put that on the record. But apparently, John Alexander had asked Jim Semivan, who's running it? And he wanted to know, like, who in the government is running it. Because Jim's saying, this is all for real, man. The government knows. And he's going, no, they don't. No. Who's running it? And then Jim Semivan says, they are.
Very true. Very true.
Yep, I agree. Okay.
Any
Dave,
other stories you want to hear, Nicole?
well, I think Dave might have a few more if we have time. Or we can always do a part 3 or part 4 with Dave. Oh, did we?
Yeah, your
freeze up?
bandwidth is low. Maybe we should cut it because you're only a half frame here.
Okay. Well then, yeah, we'll wrap this one up for tonight. I think Dave did
Yeah,
complete.
your bandwidth is coming.
So we'll end this one here
Dave
for
frozen?
tonight. Yeah, he's frozen.
No?
His image is frozen, but oh, there it snapped back on. But all right, everybody, we'll tie it off for
I think
this
we may
time,
be losing Nicole here.
and we'll
Yeah,
be
Nicole is.
to be continued.
You didn't pay your bill